allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Donnie, you can call the roll.
Commissioner Dean Hazelhurst.
Present.
Commission Chair Butch Schleier.
Present.
Commissioner Dustin Roth.
Present.
We have a quorum present.
Okay. Any changes to the order of business tonight, Darren?
Donna wants to speak.
Sure. And we do have an executive session, correct? Okay. We don't have any prior minutes tonight. I need a motion for the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda items A through G.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0. Issues from persons not on the order of business. Donna.
Thank you. I'm sure you've heard some about the federal funds that did come to each county in the state of Kansas to help with the viral that's going on in each county. And they are grant funds, so they have to be approved. We have until May the 20th that we have to submit everything that we would like to purchase or that we've already purchased. Some things that I am currently looking at. Last week, a letter went to all of our prior election board workers and recent elections to just feel and see if they would like to work. Before that, in one day, I had two prime supervisors that had worked for several years, and they could not work any longer because of the situation, which I respect fully. So we'll see what kind of response we get back there and go from there. Also, we are getting ready to mail letters to all of our voters that are on the active list, and that's 16,775. And of course, these funds, if approved and it's on the list, should be covered by federal funding. And that will be out a letter if voters would like to request an advance ballot for the primary and or the general election. So that'll be coming in the mail next week. And some of the other things are like printing additional ballots, because if we talk more at advance ballots going out, we're going to need more supplies. If we need each poll site, we do have 9 election poll sites. And if we need, I can see another election board worker just with the cleaning supplies and helping with people entering. We very much want to protect our, poll workers, our voters, and my staff very much. If you need additional voting equipment, cleaning supplies, training of poll workers on the cleaning supplies. So there are a long list here. One thing I thought was interesting, and I wish to pursue it, is a drop box that we can have ballots be dropped off for election voter registration card, and we're looking at putting that south of the building.
Mm-hmm.
So that is what's available, and then we are carefully looking at that and analyzing what the needs are in Ellis County.
Okay. Sounds
Thank
good,
you.
Donna. Any questions for Donna?
Sounds good.
I have just a couple, just to reiterate. So this is in order for anybody who would want to vote at home to request their absentee or advance ballot in the mail so they don't have to go to the polling site. Correct?
Right, that is correct. And what these grant funds are for, anything that we don't normally do, and because of the viral that we need for this special election, because the governor is looking at having polls open election day.
What was the total number of the grant funds to be accepted?
Oh,
Do
sure.
you have that?
I did not announce that. Of course, they have to be approved by the Secretary of State's office, and that's $27,877.72. But you do a mailing, and it doesn't take long to eat up a lot of that funding and equipment.
And that's probably what we would suggest to people who maybe are worried about the idea of coming to the polling site, of request their advance ballot or absentee ballot, or as is always, we are open here at the
Right, right.
administration.
And
center.
one thing that the Secretary of State's office wants to push, and I want to educate the voters, is there is a website they can go on, and it will show if we received their advance ballot request, when that ballot was mailed out, and when that ballot is received back in our office.
And I'll be pushing that out to the voters from my perspective as Ellis County Republican Chair, but to let them know that if they would like an advance ballot, this is the process to do it. So just keep an eye out for it.
Okay, right.
So-
Very true. And I would like to encourage anyone that wishes to run for office, check out our website, ellisco.net, go under election, and you'll see all the offices that are up for election. Filing deadline for party candidates is June 1st at noon. So it's coming.
It's coming. Thank you, Donna. Okay, the monthly financial report. Commissioners, do you have any questions regarding the financial report?
None for
I
me.
didn't have none.
Okay, moving on. The 2021 scope of work for the appraiser. Lisa?
Good evening, Commissioners. Lisa Reed, County Appraiser. Thought I would discuss a couple of things this evening with you. One is the scope of work. That is an item that we are required annually to provide to the state of Kansas. And as the commissioners are the client of our valuations, I'm presenting that to you. Basically just gives a really brief outline of what we have to do for 2021. It starts off with how many real property parcels we have as of to date, and personal property and oil. And other than that, it's just kind of basic. We do this every year. I thought I would present it, see if there were any comments or questions about it.
Can you go into a little bit more detail about this minimum lease issue with Neosho County?
Yeah. I will, that's my third item I was going to discuss.
Oh, okay. Sorry about
So-
that.
Yeah. Something new this year with our scope of work, because of the coronavirus, the state is being a little more lax on our some of our requirements. This time of year, we start what we call our 17% reinspection. We're required to review a sixth of the county every year. And that's physically being on the property. We don't always have to measure, but we have to review what is there against what our records indicate. And they are being a little more lax on that. So we're not going to be knocking on doors. We're just going to be doing walk-bys or drive-bys and reviewing our data that way. And that's what this 2021 Procedures for Reinspection, Quality Control, and Sales Verification is. That document, we had to provide that to the state, a plan of how we're going to do our inspections this year. And basically, that's it. We're going to try to do as little physical contact with the public as possible.
What is the difference between ag land and ag improved land?
Agricultural land is just ag land with no kind of building, no buildings, no improvements on it.
Okay,
And then we have agricultural land that have some kind of improvement, whether it's a chicken coop or a farm implement building.
so that doesn't fall under the farm with homesteads and all that stuff? That's totally different too?
No, farms, that's totally different, yes. That's all based on the classification of a property.
Has to be a residential dwelling on that.
Yes, it's a residential dwelling and then also has ag land with it.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay,
Okay. And then, because I know everybody wants to know, this time of year, I provided you with proposed assessed valuations that we have so far. They aren't final. These values will be final and certified to the county clerk June 1st. We still have some real estate appeals to process yet, And we mailed out our oil valuations May 6th, and we will be most likely, I'm anticipating about 30 or 40 appeals on those too. So we'll have some adjustments to these values because of appeals, but it gives you some place to work, something to work with as you go through budgets.
Sure, absolutely.
Think about budgets anyway, so.
And just to reiterate, Lisa, the oil and gas is down from around 33 million to 15 million too. Okay.
Yes. And most likely that will go down, and also we have numerous amount of leases that have applied for the low exemption, the low production exemption.
And that's a stripper well essentially.
Yeah,
and-
they call them marginal wells. They
Marginal.
produce 5 barrels or less per day per well. And they qualify for the exemption where the working interest does not pay anything on the reserve valuation. They only pay taxes, or only assessed on the equipment value. So we can expect oil to drop more
Sure.
as we get close to certification.
Lisa, can you tell us, is that on the potential production of the well or the actual production? So if, say, oil gets as low as it was a few weeks ago and it's not worth them to pump the well at all, and they do below the minimum requirement, is that actual production or potential production? Say it was at some time a 15 barrel a day well, and they decide to draw it down below that for this exemption. How does that work?
The exemption, well, we're right now at, for 2020 valuations, and that's how the lease was as of January 1st of 2020. They provide us with the 2019 production, and that's what the exemption will be based on what they produced in 2019.
So actual production would actually hit us in 2022 if they were to pull a lot of these wells below that threshold.
Right, and then I am guessing for 2021, we'll have a lot fewer wells, that a lot will be shut in because of the price.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So, okay,
Okay.
all right. So the big item here, the letter that you received from the Labette County Commissioner. All right, so that letter doesn't really go into a lot of explanation, so I'm going to try to do that this evening. He is asking for other counties within the state to lend financial and public support in their pursuit of taking a case from the Court of Appeals to the Kansas Supreme Court. There were several topics of appeal in the Court of Appeals decision, but hopefully tonight I can kind of I'm going to focus on one of those decisions and give you some basic background to the reason for the letter. This all started with a company called River Rock Energy. They purchased over 2,000 gas leases in 3 southeast Kansas counties and some Oklahoma counties. But the 2,000 of them were in southeast Kansas. They were Labette, Neosho, and Wilson County. River Rock appealed their 2016 county valuations for those leases. The county's total valuations were over $13 million for those over 2,000 leases. They paid their 2016 taxes under protest. You know, by then, the county had already done all their budgets with that $13 million appraised value included. But that's the option that the company went to, was to pay them under protest. At the county level, at the payment under protest, the county did not change the values for those leases because they felt they were following the state's prescribed 2016 oil and gas appraisal guide. The River Rock appealed that decision to the Board of Tax Appeals, to BOTA. BOTA upheld the county's values. From there, The company then appealed to the Court of Appeals. So this is 2016 PUPs. We just, last couple weeks they just received their Court of Appeals decision from 2016 valuations. One of the main arguments that River Rock had was how the oil and gas guide values something that is called a minimum lease value. Okay? So I'll try to briefly explain how a minimum lease value comes into this play here. So using the information that we get from the state's oil and gas guide and information we get from oil and gas operators, we determine a working interest valuation. That basically is the operator's portion of their reserve value. What we are estimating what the oil and gas left in the ground is worth. That would be their reserve value. So once we determine that value, then we apply expenses to that. And that's prescribed by the guide. So we have the reserve value and we subtract expenses. And that comes up with a value. If that value, that working interest value, has been positive, it's a positive amount, the reserve is greater than the expenses, no issue. We go on and value the lease as we typically do. But the issue has been if the guide expenses are more than the reserve value. When that occurs, the guide directs us to use a formula to come up with a minimum lease value. And that has been the issue with this Court of Appeals case. So to give you a really basic example, if the working interest valuation was, say, $100,000 and expenses were $75,000, then we have a working interest value of $25,000. We take that, we apply their equipment value and come up with their total appraised value. But the issue is if the working interest value is $50,000 and the guide says expenses are $75,000, we end up with a negative working interest valuation. The guide tells us, okay, you take the reserve amount and apply a certain percentage to it to come up with a minimum lease value. That is where the Court of Appeals has said the state's oil and gas guide is not valuing those at fair market value. You need to do something else. So they have remanded that case back to BOTA, and that's where we're sitting at right now. The counties have planned to appeal to the Supreme Court to review the case. And that is where Labette County and the other two counties are asking for help. They would like other counties to pitch in on their fees for the attorneys to represent them. Not only would this Court of Appeals decision affect those 3 counties, but would affect the other 90 counties in the state that have oil and gas. So how would that affect Ellis County? We have roughly 1,500 oil leases in the county. 942 of those are considered exempt, where this working interest valuation, minimum lease value would not come into play. Okay? But currently we have 304 oil leases that fall under this category of having a possible negative minimum lease value. That is about $3.1 million appraised and almost $905,000 assessed valuation that we could potentially lose. Because this Court of Appeals case, if it stands, it will not just be applied to those 3 counties. All counties have to follow that. And that basically says the state's oil and gas guide is not valuing oil leases at fair market value.
So if they have to rule on it again, obviously, how long do you think that'll take?
Who knows?
years?
I don't know. It could take, yeah, it could take a while. If the Court of Appeals case, from when it started with the county to Court of Appeals, has taken almost 4 years, maybe 3. The counselor or county attorney may have a better idea how long those things take. Now, as I have been appointed as the Kansas County Appraisers Association's Oil and Gas Committee Chair. So we drafted a letter of support to the counties, asking the Supreme Court to review the case, at least take the case and review it to see what.
Lease, is the Department of Revenue supporting this appeal? Are they taking a role of any kind?
At BODA's level, yes, they did. They were interested party in that, yes. And I've made some notes, and I'd be willing to share those. I'm sure, to me, this makes all sense because I work with it a lot, but I'd be willing to share my notes so you can kind of.
Does the Court of Appeals just want the state to come up with a different formula for these
Yes.
leases?
Yes.
But they don't say what.
No, they've remanded that back to BODA, and BODA is supposed to determine that.
So once they determine it, it could all go to court again.
Yes. And, the county appraisers are required to follow, per statute, are required to follow the guides that the property valuation produces, and that includes the oil and gas guide. There is a stipulation in there that we can deviate from it if we have just cause.
Mhm.
But for over 300 leases, to deviate from the guide is prohibitive. We are mass appraisers. The guides help us value these because we are mass appraisers. It's time prohibitive, cost prohibitive to value these individually. So that's why we have the guide.
Sure.
So,
Well, I imagine there's a couple governance aspects that come into play here, and that is incentive for exploration, that we don't want to disincentivize that exploration and create leases that may not be productive but could have been productive or had the potential to be productive when they were drilled. I would have to look into this. Obviously, we're the highest oil producing county in the state, and I imagine that we need to take a really close look at this. But the last thing I would want to do is disincentivize exploration in Ellis County by overtaxing production that isn't good enough to meet this minimum threshold. So I can see both sides. It's just tough for me to put a dollar amount to us protecting our interest over the oil and gas interest of the producers in Ellis County. I don't think we should do that until we look, a lot closer at this from my perspective.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, Commissioner.
Yeah,
Dean?
Just from being involved in the oil side of it, I guess I'd like to see them come out here and ask us the questions versus the smaller counties in Kansas on this appeals.
I will say that the oil and gas guide has been around for a long time, longer than I've been at the county. And in the past, there's always been an oil and gas committee that has helped with the guide. And it has been made up of industry people. There've been large operators, companies, representatives on that, and it's been made up of county officials, and it's been made up of state. So, in my opinion, the industry has been involved in this guide from day one. And until this out-of-state company has now purchased Kansas leases, hasn't been an issue. But my opinion, the industry's had a hand in establishing these calculations.
Have they asked you any questions about it yet? Being, I mean, we kind of are the largest oil producing county.
Just through Kansas County Appraisers Association, if I've been involved in this.
Okay, nobody from like the Court of Appeals or anybody's ever
Oh,
called you?
no.
And just asked you any questions
No, no.
about this? No? How would it affect your county?
Is the state going to wait for the Supreme Court to rule on this before they come out with a revised formula?
Yes, yes, because it's still pending litigation with,
So this could be a while away. I mean, it could be a while down the road, correct?
yes.
Maybe years.
Lisa or Bill, do you know the statute of limitations on that tax that they're paying under protest? What's the statute of limitations?
As long as they made the payment under protest, there wouldn't be any,
Okay.
pending the outcome of their original appeal to the Board of Tax Appeals.
So this could last a while then, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm guessing, and maybe Tom can help, he does appellate practice, I don't, but I would guess Supreme Court, you're looking at a minimum of a year to get to a decision.
Tom says yes. 18 months.
I will say one of the other issues here is even though the oil and gas industry has been involved in this, I'd imagine being involved in thinking what is fair at $120 a barrel oil versus negative $38 a barrel oil seems a whole lot different ballpark of how they decide what's worth what, and
Sure.
and fairness becomes a completely different issue as they watch their bank accounts go to nothing. So it's definitely an interesting case, and I think from my perspective, I like to research a little bit, maybe reach out to some people in the industry to figure out their perspective and figure out what's fair for them and what's fair for us counties as we try to budget, and because budgeting is hard when a lot of protests are done on payments.
Sure, absolutely.
And on that note, this year, so far, we have 300 leases that would fall under this minimum lease
Yeah.
value issue. Prior years, when I looked at it, we didn't have that many, and that's because of the oil price.
Yeah,
Sure.
they drop production
Yeah,
below
the
that.
the reserve value is a lot less this year because of the oil price.
Mm-hmm.
The expenses haven't changed in the guide, so we've got our lower reserve price, and the expenses are the same, so
Yeah.
we have more that have fallen into this category.
Mm-hmm.
So, but if I can be of any help in questions or concerns or whatever,
Sure.
let me know, and if I don't know the answer, or I'll sure find it.
Okay.
The state did reach out to all the oil and gas counties and request some basic information, like, they had us go back to 2016. How many leases did we have that would fall under that minimum lease value issue, and what would have been the value loss because of that? And I did ask the state to pass along the information once they got all the counties' data to provide to you, but they haven't done that yet. I thought maybe I'd have it Friday, so I didn't get
And it looks like this River Rock company that purchased those gas wells was the first one to start this into process with the courts.
Correct.
And so we don't have any protested tax payments of nature in Ellis County right now.
Not with that value, that
Okay.
issue, no,
Very good.
and hopefully not.
Yeah.
Hopefully not in the future.
Yeah.
Because, if we follow the guide, we have no other option but to follow what the state has us.
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense. It's just such a complicated issue between the production and the taxing agent,
Yes.
for sure.
Okay.
Okay? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Lisa.
you.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, moving on. County Administrator Report. Darren?
I have nothing.
Nothing? County Commission reports. Commissioner Roth.
I did get to go to the City of Hayes meeting. It sounds as though they're obviously just like all of us worried about their budgets and would like to take a little time to think about their contribution to the Northwest Business Corridor. I'm going to have personal discussions with all of them about my desire to see them invest and not pull back during this economic time. I think that they are the biggest beneficiary of the project because of the truck stop and their reliance on sales tax revenue. But I can also, from the meeting, see their need and desire, because they're so reliant on sales tax, to worry about their budget. You know, we always want to have the reminder that we did turn over a $1.5 million grant to help work on that project out there. And all in all, I just want to feel like we're working together to get something done. I think this is one of the largest projects in about, 152 years of Ellis County, where the city of Hayes and Ellis County will work together on something. And I just want to make sure that they're coming on board and interested in the investment that we're willing to make too. So that's all from me.
Okay. Commissioner Hazelhorst.
I also talked to a few of the city commissioners about the same issue, and appreciate Dustin going the other night. I was out of town. Also, Governor Kelly, if you guys watched her, she talked about if the KAC would issue her a letter about delaying the property tax payment. KAC did issue her a letter. We have not heard back on what her response is to that, but KAC did issue a letter to her. So that's all I have.
Okay. And I have no report. Executive session.
Yes, Chairman, I move that the Board of County Commissioners recess into executive session under the following exemption to the Kansas Open Meeting Act pursuant to attorney-client privilege exemption. Subject to be discussed during executive session is legal consultation for about 20 minutes, and we will resume in 20 minutes. Those attending will be the Board of County Commissioners, County Councilor Bill Jeter, and Interim County Administrator Darren Meyer.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 3-0.
Bill Jeter's got it. Bill took it with him.
I can do it.
Okay, we're out of executive, go ahead.
Okay. No action, but make another motion. I move the commission recess to executive session along with the Board of County Commissioners, Bill Jeter, and Interim County Administrator Darren Myers, to discuss attorney-client privilege, to discuss legal matter in pursuant to the Open Kansas Meeting Act exception for attorney-client privilege, with open session to resume in this room in 10 minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Aye.
Okay, no action taken, and we will adjourn at 6:12.
See you all Thursday.